Anyway, welcome to our panel. We have Tim from Telstra, Ian from Activate Me, we have Dan from Vodafone, we have David from Optus, and we have Ged from Amaysim. So welcome. You can give them a clap for coming in today. Yesterday, and I'm going to move so you guys can see me and sit there. Tim's over there. Now you can all see me now. All right, good. Yesterday, the TCP code got mentioned a lot, the Telecommunications Consumer Protection Code, and one of my staff pointed out to me that I should highlight that we actually have a guide for all the rights that consumers get in the TCP code, and it's actually available out the front. It's called Making the Right Call, and it's just interesting to see what is contained in that code and how it relates directly to you and your usage. I'll just put that down. Now, before we go into the panel discussion, because we've never had Activate Me come and present before or join in panels, I've actually asked Ian to give us a very short rundown of what Activate Me does, because it's also very topical because they're running services over Sky Muster. So Ian, maybe you want to do that from the podium there, and then we'll get straight into it and we'll talk for a couple of minutes.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks for the invitation to be able to come up and present at the ACAN conference. Before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which we are on, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. We got the slides.
There it is.
Just before I start, a lot of people wouldn't know Activate Me, unlike the other big telcos here, because we really specialise in services for the bush. And just before I start, I just wanted to point out on that slide there, one of our Indigenous community phones. So these are a ruggedised phone that has a solar panel for power and a satellite dish for communications, and they were originally set up for voice services, but they are now all Wi-Fi enabled, and I'll talk about those a little bit as we go through. So just about Activate Me, the company was actually formed in 2002, and it was formed to provide services to underserviced areas in rural and remote Australia. We've been taking part in the government Indigenous Community Phones program for a number of years now, which is now the Remote Community Telecommunications program, and there are 301 of those sites in Indigenous communities all over Australia except New South Wales. So for some reason New South Wales didn't want to take part in the original program, so there are none of those remote community telecommunications services in New South Wales. In 2011 we became a provider in the NBN. Prior to that we've been in the satellite schemes, in the higher biz scheme, in the ABG, and since becoming an NBN RSP we've obviously moved into fixed wireless and also into fibre services as well. But predominantly the company is still focused in regional areas, and we are the largest in Sky Muster. We now have 10,000 active services with Sky Muster already up and running at this point in time, and we're still working through a backlog of orders. We're also a partner of New South Wales Farmers as well. One of the things that Activate Me pride ourselves on is just going that extra mile for people in regional and remote Australia. We've, in situations where people are on the outskirts of a fixed wireless area and they may have a failed wireless install, we'll always approach that by actually putting in a trouble ticket and seeing whether we can get that person connected with a higher pole, because it's much better for them to be on fixed wireless than on Sky Muster because of the data download limits. We've also, in southern New South Wales, around the Albury and Wagga area, been trialling on a number of sites where we actually extend fixed wireless by doing a point-to-point connection from one property out to properties outside the fixed wireless area. And we've successfully implemented around about 18 of these sites where we're using the other ports on the NBN NTD for neighbouring properties. And that service works particularly well, and again, it stops people having to rely on the Sky Muster service. We also have an islands program. So there are two sides of the islands program. There are ones where we're talking about private householders. So a situation like Lord Howe Island, where the whole island we organised with NBN to actually have all of the equipment delivered out to the island, and installers go and live on the island for a period of 3 months and connect all of the properties that had ordered Sky Muster on the island. The other side of the islands program is some of the remote Indigenous communities. So Grid is a great example, and at the company's own cost, we actually got equipment transferred across to Grid, and we installed one of our Wi-Fi community networks there, which is a wireless network which works off one of those Indigenous community telephones. So what this does basically is, off the satellite service, is it provides a Wi-Fi connectivity for anybody who has a Wi-Fi enabled device. They just connect to that Wi-Fi service, and then it will direct them to a website where they can buy a prepaid PIN, and that gives them a limit with the amount of data that they can actually download. It's been used by local communities, so some of the Indigenous communities, visitors, staff who are out there working for government services. It gives them access to emergency services. VoIP services do work particularly well over it, so anybody using a Lin phone app or WhatsApp or Skype, they work particularly well over this service. There are a number of sites that the Indigenous community can actually access without having to actually pay. So for example, some of the government sites are all free sites that they can go to anytime they like. So I hope that gives you a bit of an understanding of where Activate Me is currently at, and where we actually provide services out into some of those remote and regional communities. Thanks for the opportunity today.
Okay. Well, we've asked each of these guys to come up with one or two things that each of the organisation does to equip consumers to get and stay connected. So we might just go down the line to warm you up. Now, the mics are on the floor, so if you just pick them up, there's one on either end. So maybe Jed, you can start.
Sure, no worries. Thanks for having me back again, Teresa. It's always good to be here. I find every year we learn so much from talking to everyone in the room. So I'll keep it pretty short and sweet, because for those of us that don't know Amaysim, we're Australia's 4th largest telco mobile service provider, actually run on the Optus network. David's sitting here next to me, and our whole approach in the last 6 years has just been simple in terms of we keep it simple. So the way we help people stay connected once they are connected is the pricing is simple, the plans are simple, whether it's prepaid or postpaid, you pay the same price. There's no lock-in contract, so if you want to leave us, you don't pay any cancellation fees. And our financial hardship is quite simple and reasonable as well, because we find at the moment what can sometimes impact people staying connected is lack of understanding around data use. Even though complaints are falling quite rapidly, which is a great endorsement of the industry, data is still something that people are grappling with and learning to understand. So you'll see a lot of people still using, say, what's called casual data usage, where you're paying per megabyte, which is going to lead to a pretty high bill. So with our financial hardship, we try to take the reasonable approach of doing what's called re-rating, where basically people go into high casual usage, and we'll help them out when we look at things and understand that it's a mistake. We'll re-rate things to data packs for them, and then help educate them on what they should be doing. And we use our social media assets quite heavily to educate people on data usage and say my 4-year-old son's spending an hour on YouTube, with a mobile network, what that's going to mean. It's not going to mean a few hundred megabytes, it's going to mean a lot more than that. And a lot of people just don't have that understanding still. So for us, staying connected is about education as well as affordability. And that's where we really focus our efforts at the moment. Okay.
All right, I might pass on to David from Optus.
Thanks very much. Well, look, as one of the larger telcos, the biggest challenge we often face in enabling people to be connected is complexity. Because we're large organisations offering multiple product suites and we quite often carry legacy product suites. So in the past few years, we've focused a lot on trying to reduce some of that complexity and, more to the point, train our own frontline staff to help people cut through it. And one of the first initiatives that we did was we've actually brought a lot of our customer service back in-house, as it were, moving away from what was our original franchise model. And we find that it improves outcomes and it improves the effectiveness of communication between us, and not just our customers, but aspirational customers too, people who are just interested in our products, in addition to obviously offering various tiers of plans, from low access plans up to the more complex ones.
Thanks, David. Okay, Dan from Vodafone.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I just want to talk about two things in the introductory remarks. So the first is really the incredible mission that we've been on to simplify our products and services and to solve the things that were annoying and frustrating our customers. And the number of things we've done are truly phenomenal. So we were the first to introduce the network guarantee. Try our service for 30 days. If you don't like it, you can walk away, no penalties, no questions. And I might add, very few people are exercising that option these days. Data overage was a key problem, so we introduced the $10 1 gigabyte overage, which we've managed to move most of our customers to. So rather than paying a very high rate per megabyte, you just clock over for a whole gig for $10. IDD rates were annoying people, international calls, so high rates for international calls. So we introduced a couple of years ago 300 included minutes on many of our plans to any international destination, and of course the $5 a day roaming. So take your home plan with you, $5 a day over 50 countries, use it as if you were at home for just a flat rate of $5 a day. And so we've just worked through these one by one and as quickly as possible solved them. And you can see the results in our customer complaints. So the TIO complaints, we used to be the highest in the industry by nearly double, about 19 per 10,000 customers every quarter. We are now the best telco in the industry by a long measure, down below 4 complaints per 10,000 customers. So I think our customers are telling us and telling the TIO that we've really managed to simplify and cut through all of that. The topic though for the session I think is very appropriate. How do we get everyone connected? The real issue that we've been focusing on is quite a fundamental one. If you live in a major city in Australia, you have access to competitive mobile services that are some of the best in the world. You can choose to take all of those things that I just outlined that you can get from competition, from Vodafone. But if you live outside the major cities, it becomes very clear we live in a very extreme geography, one of the largest land areas in the world, one of the lowest population densities, and therefore the ability to actually build and duplicate mobile infrastructure across Australia is simply not there. It's very, very limited. The ACCC announced about 10 days ago that it's opening an inquiry into inter-carrier roaming, so the ability for one operator to use another operator's network in regional Australia, likely Telstra's. This has been characterised by some as an extreme, risky, unusual move that will fundamentally undermine incentives for investment. We like to focus on the facts and the international comparisons. Australia is one of the largest geographies, but every other Western economy with a large geography and areas of low population density has regulated that same service. The USA mandated it in 1981 and extended it from voice to data services in 2010. New Zealand mandated it in 2001. Canada mandated it in 2008. France mandated it in 2010. Those are 5 of the 6 largest Western economies in the world, and we have the most extreme geography of any of them. Some people have said that it must undermine incentives for investment. Unfortunately, that's simply not true. In all of those countries, you can track capital intensity, so the amount people are investing relative to their revenue before and after those decisions. In the US, in the 3 years before they extended it from voice to data, the industry was spending about 13% of revenue on capital. After that decision, it went up to 16%. AT&T, the biggest operator, was spending about 14%. After that decision, it went up to 17%. So if you look across all of those countries that have regulated it, there is no evidence that it undermines incentives for investment, and in fact, in some, it significantly increased incentives for investment. We think this is really the only way that we're going to get competition and choice for everyone, to get everyone connected to a mobile service. So we look forward to a robust and rational debate on that.
Now, I'm going to skip over Ian because Ian kind of already did do this in his introduction. I'm going to go straight to Tim, which is actually probably quite timely because I'm sure that Tim, as well as answering questions, is probably also going to give some response to Dan, which might well spark off a bit more discussion on the panel. And for people that aren't totally up on telecommunications policy, which would be completely understandable, this is the hottest debate in telco over the last few weeks since the ACCC announced it was doing an inquiry into mobile roaming. So anyway, Tim, what are you doing to equip consumers before you respond to that
Sure.
discussion?
So thank you very much. And I suppose over the years, there have been a number of Telstra people present at this forum, really particularly focused on our Access for Everyone program. And that really is a flagship program for Telstra around, particularly focusing on the vulnerable customers, the needs of those who are disadvantaged. So for customers in financial hardship, we have the bill assistance program, the in-contact service, and the specialised work of our hardship team. For low-income customers and people with a disability, we have the sort of the pension and discount. For community organisations offering specialised accommodation, we have the sponsored access service. And there's a broad range of services there. In a previous life, I used to work in a bank and was heavily involved in the access of affordable credit. And one of the things we used to say was that, and particularly we got in microfinance, and that people looking for specialised credit access to microfinance didn't form a neat line out in front of our branches. And so one of the challenges I think for telcos is to, with our complexity, with our size, is truly to understand the needs of vulnerable customers. And I think that for the past 40 years now, we've really been engaged in very purposeful discussions with consumer organisations around framing that product, that portfolio of specialised products and services. And in the last 12 months, we've done a very significant program for women at risk or experiencing domestic violence, working again in partnership with the domestic violence agencies to build out our program here. The second area that I just want to touch on is the importance of being really thoughtful and strategic around digital inclusion or insights into digital exclusion. And I think hopefully you would have seen in your packs, and I think maybe Julian from Swinburne provided an update.
Did a great presentation.
Yeah, and we're really proud of that. I think that is a real landmark piece of research looking at the characteristics of inclusion and exclusion, affordability, access, and digital ability. A couple of thoughts on the roaming question. And the first is, and the most obvious, is to say there's nothing stopping Vodafone investing in rural and regional Australia. Vodafone are not some sort of recent startup from New South Wales. They're in fact a very large multinational telco with $70 billion of revenue. Telstra has long been investing in rural and regional Australia. The amount of investment in rural and regional Australia at the moment from telcos is probably unprecedented, and you would have seen a further announcement recently that Telstra will spend a further $3 billion each year over the next 3 years. There's nothing stopping Vodafone having access to our towers. There's regulated access. There's regulated access to backhaul. I think what we object to is that sense of Vodafone being able to have a free ride. I suppose that sense of, if you are have a Holden dealership in a rural location, and you invest in that, you invest in servicing the needs of that community with cars, and then the regulatory environment changes, and then you have to put half of your showroom and provide access to Ford cars, that is not going to be an incentive for people to invest in Holden dealerships. So there's nothing stopping Vodafone investing in the bush. There's more that we can do in terms of the rural and regional network. There's a range of complexities on the international scene, and in fact France is moving back from roaming. So we think that what is really important is the incentive for telcos to invest, and we have a different view there on that.
Okay, now obviously I do want to cover some other things, but I know that David's itching to say something. He's been just jumping in his seat.
Absolutely. I've known Dan for a bit of a while. In fact, we worked together for a while, and I've got to say, he was very cheeky and very compelling, but quite wrong, and I wouldn't have tolerated it when we used to work together quite closely. I'm sure you've all heard of the phrase, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. Well, Dan, come on down, mate. Look, I think the general points that have been made about Vodafone's position on this are quite true, and I'll let people make a judgment about this, but I think you also got to look at their own record. Their global CEO is on record as opposing the form of roaming that Dan's now arguing for, and in fact opposed it very vociferously in the UK. Yes, it is true, it's being wound back in France, something that Dan cited. It's also true that there is mandated roaming in the USA, and there is mandated roaming in Canada, and there is mandated roaming in New Zealand. However, you've got to ask why and talk about the circumstances of the market. In both the USA and Canada, they have had to deal with the legacy of regional spectrum markets. I've got a very good friend in the Democratic Party in Virginia, and he's a great friend to have because he's worth several $100 million. The reason why he's worth several $100 million is his family had the regional spectrum licence for Virginia and therefore the southern suburbs of Washington. Only problem with that was people riding on his spectrum couldn't actually make a telephone call in Maryland, which was on the other side of Washington, from literally northern suburbs to southern suburbs of Washington DC. And that's the reason why you have mandated roaming in the United States. We have national spectrum licences. Same thing applies in Canada. And we can deal with New Zealand. Well, the reason it came about in New Zealand was they were looking to introduce third and fourth mobile carriers. It was actually opposed by Vodafone in New Zealand, and I believe up until quite recently it continued to be. But there was a condition on that the new entrant would have access to mobile roaming, but in return they would have to fulfil mandated market share and mandated investment targets. So they're quite different and misleading arguments. And then we can deal with the issue of the level of capital intensity. Well, Dan's quite right to talk about capital intensity, but there's many drivers of capital intensity. I think we all realise that there's such a thing as 4G having come in over the top of 3G, and 3G having come in over the top of 2G. And then, of course, there is the greater capital intensity that is driven by increased use of mobile spectrum for data and carriage, which requires more equipment, more density of towers, etc., etc. So you need to be very careful about some of these things being plucked out of the air. But I think that's probably enough said, and we should get back to the wider topic.
And I mean, I'm keen to get as much information about all of this out in the open in the near future before, obviously, submissions close. It'd be nice if you guys would publish some of your positions and some of the statistics and information you have access to before the close of submissions, because I know there's a lot of people here in the audience that are very interested in this topic as well. And I don't know if Ian or Ged wanted to say anything on that topic before I moved on.
No, we'll let the carriers argue it. Like, that's part of the beauty of not having to run a thirsty network. We focus on what we do best.
Yeah. Okay. And you want to say skip that one? Okay. Not that bullet? Okay. All right. We did have a few other questions prepared, but I'm sure that some of those might come up when we actually throw it to the audience. But before we throw to the audience, I did want to talk a little bit about complaints trends. And Vodafone's already mentioned that, and congratulations, Vodafone, great work in regards to that. What we know overall is that complaints are coming down, and massively so over the last few years. And now they're starting to plateau a little bit. And then poor Ian emailed me the other day to highlight that, in fact, they are experiencing the opposite trend. And VIRRR, the Burr Group, highlighted this yesterday because of the issues on Skymaster. So maybe if each of you could just make a quick observation in relation to perhaps complaints coming down, if that relates to you, but also perhaps the areas where complaints are not coming down that we still need to focus on.
Look, I might start off. Look, in essence, it's a function of the industry maturing and understanding that it's no longer in an environment where there might be 2 or 3 customers waiting in behind if you lose one. It's about retention, it's about service, and people just won't cop it. The other thing is, it's probably an industry, because it grew up with a TIO almost from the very start of the mobile era, that to some degree informally outsourced its complaint processes rather than taking accountability for its own actions. So that's basically what people are doing, and I think as a result of that, some people may disagree, but overall customer service is getting better, it's getting more consistent. Telcos are getting more approachable and working out ways to reach out to their customers. There are, however, some wrinkles in areas. I don't think as an industry we've quite worked out how to solve the issue of the interface with the NBN just yet. There's a lot of manual processes, there's a lot of feeling the way through, and that's going to generate the odd problem, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Okay, we might... Dan, do you have further comments to make about complaints?
Just 2 comments, so I won't complain about the radical misrepresentation around roaming before, but
Noted.
The thing that we really did was actually a mindset shift. So I think historically the company viewed complaints as something that you needed to manage rather than signals that there's something that you really need to think about and probably need to change. And we've now set up a very systematic process where our frontline teams have a route direct to the top of the company to tell us dynamically what is it customers are complaining about, and we then have a forum that doesn't simply ask how can we make those annoying customers go away, but asks what is it that we could fundamentally change. And it's out of that process that we made big changes to our products and services, made big changes to our credit policies, made big changes to our whole complaints management system. And I think it's only when you make that fundamental mindset shift that you can drive the sort of amazing reductions that we've driven over the last few years.
Okay, good. Now, pass the mic to Ian, but before you speak, Ian, if I could just highlight we're going to go to the audience in a minute, so get your questions ready. And also, ACAN staff that are on mics, just grab the mic so that we can do that nice and seamlessly. Ian.
Thanks, Teresa. We are currently experiencing an enormous lift in the number of complaints, and they're all around Skymaster. So, as we said, we've got about 24,000 applications for Skymaster, and 10,000 are installed. There are all sorts of teething problems associated with Skymaster, and the installation process is an absolute bugbear. We've tripled the size of our call centre, and they're all located in Melbourne. We've got rid of all of the offshore ones so that we can actually deal with the issues better. But it's still a 3 or 4 hour wait, and the issues are so far removed from things that we can control as an RSP, because the NBN do all of the installs and they subcontract that to Ericsson, who then subcontract that to Skybridge and Hills, and that communication about the installation process is done by those third parties. And the first point of call for the customer when the install fails or the installer doesn't turn up or things don't work is to come back to us, and they might be things that we can't resolve. Now, having said that, we're looking at better ways to actually communicate to our customers. It's all about communication. These people out in the bush, they're used to having to struggle to get services. It's not like sitting in Melbourne and Sydney in the suburbs. They're used to actually having to deal with the problems of the tyranny of distance. So one of the things that we can do is everybody's got one of these. And so social media is a great way to actually keep customers informed. They want to actually be kept informed. So utilising social media in a much better way will actually help reduce some of those calls into the call centre and keep those customers actually informed. It enables us through that social media channel to actually communicate with the customers much more effectively than we can by making them wait in the call centre queue. But you know, the NBN are doing a fabulous job in terms of rolling out 9,000 satellite installs a month, which is enormous in a country the size of Australia. And the teething problems are just there, and it's going to take 6 months to actually get over all of those teething problems.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. I'm sure there'll be some more questions from the floor related to that. Tim?
Look, just a couple of brief points on that. The trajectory on complaints is going in the right direction, but make no mistake, it's still too high.
Yeah.
And we do have much more work to do. I think the NBN interface remains a challenge, but getting better. One of the things that remains a challenge is complexity, and a little bit of analysis of some complaint scenario is around how we deal with people with disability. We've had a few of those complaints go through the TIO. So that's a particular challenge where we're in the midst of reviewing our disability action plan at the moment. That's a focus for us. But, complexity is a challenge.
Yeah. And now just pass the mic down to Ged. And just remind you, Tim, there's a mic on that floor just near your foot, so maybe kick that up so it'll be a bit easier to... Ged, what would you like to add to that?
Well, we talk a lot about complexity and simplicity, and I agree with what everyone said. And one thing that we've seen, as I mentioned, Amaysim is about 6 years old, and I'll give you a 2-second case study of a mobile service provider that we bought in January called Bayer. At the time of purchasing Bayer, had about 140,000 customers, huge level of complaints. So it's about instilling a culture of simplicity and a culture of compliance across the industry, whether you're big or small. And we dove in straight away. And while we see Bayer as a price fighter, whereas Amaysim is more about customer experience, there is just basic things that we could do straight away, like remove unnecessary fees, make some of the plans easy to understand, make the plans even more powerful for customers that really are wallet conscious. And as a result, we saw the complaints through the TIO drop by about 80 or 90%, I think, when you look at a year-on-year comparison. And at the same time, we haven't lost focus on what we do at Amaysim in terms of making things more simple. And now our complaint level is less than one complaint per 10,000 customers, which is by far the lowest in the industry, but still not low enough. Because I think what we need to do is just keep sight on making it easy for customers that do have the ability to do things themselves, able to do things themselves by doing things like, say, we used to get all the contacts from people wanting to swap a number from one SIM card to another if a phone got stolen or if they broke their SIM card. Normally that means going into the retailer on a Saturday, waiting in line for an hour, or waiting on the phone for half an hour. Where you can make those things simple and make it easy to do online for people that have the ability to do these things online, you give people power back and you make things even simpler for people. And that's just one example of a lot of things that we're looking at doing, and doing things such as Vodafone with forums internally. Things like we have something called contact therapy once a week where everyone gets together, groups across the business, and we figure out why customers are contacting us. Every point of contact is a failure for us. We haven't enabled the customer to do something themselves. So the more we focus on those as an industry, the more we'll be able to get the level of complaints down, not to make us look good, but just to make it easier for customers and lower churn, because we are commercial organisations at the end of the day. So lowering churn is part of what we do, because especially when you don't have contracts, you live and die by your churn. So that's also part of the reason for us having such a strong focus on basically making it simple and empowering customers.
Okay, now, anyone in the audience who's got a question? Oh, wow. The record number of questions. Okay, I think we might go to, is it Robin? Did you put your hand, Robin? Yeah. I know this is going to take us back on to the favourite topic of the day.
Hi, Robin Eckerman. A question for the panel regarding mandating roaming. The demonstrable reality of remote communications is there's not the population density to generate revenues to attract investment. It's very demonstrable. And roaming is one way to improve the efficiency. What we're seeing with things like the Mobile Black Spot program is increasing public contribution, and so it sort of makes sense that all Australians should benefit from taxpayer contributions. Roaming's one way. Another way, which I'd welcome a comment on from the panel, see how many go into conniptions, would be to invite NBN Co, authorise them or empower them to offer wholesale-only mobile coverage in conjunction with its fixed wireless. That gives an immediate fourfold boost of investment efficiency, because you'll pick up the traffic of all three mobile operators plus the fixed wireless, and you'll create an avenue to offload customers from satellite as that gets saturated in due course. So welcome your comment.
Okay, so let's try and make them quick, because we've obviously got a lot of demand for questions. So, okay, it's like going to go Dan.
I might grab
might
a before Dan.
I was just going to say, maybe you should have one for the yes, one for the no. Okay, so Optus is going to take...
Get a bit of truth serum here.
Right.
No, look, you're quite right to raise the possibility of alternatives, and that's why we, for one, argue quite strongly for a co-location arrangement in the Black Spots program, and with co-location allied to some of the other mandated access arrangements, people can have the benefit of the public funds, the primary initiator of whatever the Black Spot infrastructure is, but they've got to make access available net of the cost of the public funds. That way, the butter is being spread more broadly across the bread. As for the question of roaming generally, I think the point has been made about what it potentially does to incentives for investment. You spoke about the NBN. I think the NBN is hard pressed enough to do what its current core mandate is without getting into an area of the market which is attracting record levels of capital investment. Telstra spoke of their amount. Last year we spent $1.8 billion essentially on mobile network infrastructure. That's a record level. We'll do the same again this coming year, and a large proportion of that is in regional and underserved areas. These are the new areas of competition, ironically being driven by the NBN, because people want to be in the same place that the NBN is potentially opening up competition with mobile competition. There have been other alternatives tried. For example, in Scandinavia, spectrum sharing was encouraged at the very auction process, but in return, and carriers were allowed to share spectrum, share infrastructure, etc., etc. The quid pro quo was that everyone who participated also had to do their own investment and offer their remote area services. And I'd be interested to see what Vodafone wants to do.
All right, okay, Dan's jumping in his seat, so...
Am I allowed to speak now?
Yeah.
So I think there was a point raised earlier, which was, there's nothing stopping other people investing in regional Australia. The only thing stopping it is the fundamental laws of economics. We have a country that is 7.6 million square kilometres with a population density of 3. It is the most extreme geography to try and roll out mobile networks. You inevitably get to a point where there simply isn't the return, there simply isn't any case to invest. There's then a variety of models for infrastructure sharing and roaming that you can use. Co-location is one of them, active sharing is another, spectrum sharing is another, roaming is another. All that those do is give different ways of shifting that boundary as to where you have to stop investing, where you can't invest any further. They simply shift it a bit further. Co-location is the crudest and most inefficient way of doing it, because you duplicate the radio network equipment, you duplicate the transmission, you duplicate a lot of the cost of providing the service.
Provide competition.
If you, sorry?
And you provide competition.
But all you do is you shift the point at which you can provide competition from A to B. You simply cannot, in a geography such as Australia, shift it so that you can connect all Australians, so that in regional Australia, people have a service and have a choice. You need to look at more efficient forms of infrastructure sharing, which inevitably bring you down to one infrastructure. NBN is one option that is worth considering, although I do agree NBN's trying to do a lot at the moment, so whether they can take it on is another question. Or you look at roaming in order to access the single infrastructure that is there. It's so clear in Australia, you need to look at efficient forms of sharing. Roaming is one of them. Otherwise, we're simply not going to solve the problem for regional Australia.
Thank God the ACCC is looking at this. Okay, Tim.
I just encourage Dan to be a bit more imaginative. You know, there are other alternatives. One of the things Telstra is doing is we have a co-investment program with the Northern Territory Government to roll out infrastructure in remote communities. Now, it's part, you know, we think that's a good thing, consistent with where we want to be in terms of our engagement with Indigenous Australia. It has enormous value for the Northern Territory Government in terms of health facilities now being online, education facilities being online, the opportunity for industry and enterprise in those locations. There are other options.
Okay, we're going to go to the back there to, is it Liam? Yeah.
Yeah, good day. Liam Campbell from Indigenous Remote Communications. First of all, just like to commend Activate Me for some of the things that you're trying out in remote communities. Obviously, Telstra is the only mobile provider for the majority of remote Indigenous communities. So I guess something that I wanted to raise was what would make a big difference to people in remote communities, I think, is better tools for managing data. And what I mean by that is I know that the Telstra app is great, but it could be a lot better. I think it's text-based. Something as simple as putting a visual marker for your data usage as opposed to having to look at the text, which splits it into night data and day data, and of course you've got the new and one of them runs out, and this sort of thing. I guess the other thing, which might sound really counterintuitive, is actually the ability to limit your data or some way to control it. For example, when you're hooking your 4G network, it's very fast, so you get served high quality video and these sorts of things. And if you don't know how to change those settings and everything like that, but for the user to be able to select that somehow in an interface in a Telstra app to say, limit my video or do this, whatever's technically possible, just better tools for managing data will make a huge difference to people. And obviously, there's a whole education campaign and different things about turning background, refreshing this sort of stuff. So I'm just wondering, are Telstra looking at these things?
Okay, just probably a quick response, Tim, because I think that's really a comment and a suggestion for the future.
Yeah, no, it's a really good comment, and really happy to sort of look at that in a bit more detail. One of the things we are finding, and this is an important finding from the Digital Inclusion Index. In broad terms, access is going the right way. In broad terms, affordability of telecommunications services is coming down, and people are using more of it, and that has its own challenges as well. But one of the big insights, I think, from the index is the importance of digital ability. That those skills, capabilities to be an effective digital citizen. And one of the things we're specifically doing in the NT associated with our the rollout to the 13 remote communities is trialling this idea of an Indigenous digital mentor. So training up someone in the community who can work around those competencies, those skills, those behaviours to really embed that capability to be effective digital citizens. So that's something that we're really trying and going to be very interested in, but happy to catch up after.
Great, and that's an exciting initiative. I've heard quite a bit about it. Jeremy, you've got a question over there. You're swapping over interpreters. Okay, go.
It's Jonathan Brown from Consumer Action Law Centre. I'm interested in particularly all this conversation about data usage, but particularly people who are on low incomes. The way things used to be pre-internet was that we would have access to free-to-air broadcasts. And if you managed to cover the cost of the television set, you would have guaranteed access to a certain level of democratic content, of entertainment and Australian culture. Of course, the internet has changed that, and that model is changing. At the moment, if I go to each of your telcos, you have a certain level of unmetered content. So with Telstra, I can get an AFL pass and get unmetered streaming of that. With Optus, I can get my Stan or Netflix subscription and get unmetered access to that, which is great as a middle-class person. It means that I can bring down my data usage and save money. It's great for me personally. I love getting access to unmetered stuff on your networks. But for a person on a low income, my question is, well, why isn't there a focus on providing more unmetered content to democratic content? Even down to things like health services. Why isn't Headspace's services unmetered so a young person on their mobile phone can chat with Headspace and not have to worry about the data use? Or Lifeline, their services. Why is the focus on unmetered content inequitably helping the middle and upper classes to save money, but there seems to be no focus on unmetered content for people on lower incomes to access democratic information and access content that's important to our culture? And the other point I'll make is the less access people have to democratic information in our society, that's how we get Pauline Hanson re-elected 20 years later again.
Okay, now just to comment on that quickly before we throw to the panel. Last year, unmetered access came up as one of the main suggestions for affordability going forward. And one thing that has changed since then is that we actually have seen some movement in relation to isolated children and their families accessing education, so that we now have unmetered, we have education separated from the usage of the plan generally. So you have an education connection and you have a general connection, which is still a struggle as far as managing your data, but it's a lot better than it was. And each stage is slightly different in that regard. So we are seeing some changes, but there needs to be a lot more. So anybody want to comment on that from the panel?
Just one comment. That was a great question, by the way. I quite enjoyed all the thoughts that it provoked. But I think there are basically two ways that you can address it. One is that there's some problem with the amount of data that people are able to get, and then you have to go and solve it by picking and choosing what is it that you unmeter. I'm not convinced, certainly on Vodafone, that actually there is that problem anymore. The number of complaints that we get now about data overage are virtually minuscule, because we have exponentially increased the amount of data that we include in our plans. We moved to give unlimited talk and text, unlimited calls and text domestically. We moved to put in these big buckets of international calls. And so the number of complaints that we get of people who've run into an issue because they've exhausted their allowance.
So is that a function of usage alerts though too? Or is it...
I think that's certainly effective, certainly.
Because people are probably peeking back their usage a bit when they get that alert.
Yeah, I think that's certainly effective.
There's also
you can talk now.
Thanks. But look, I'd agree. The market's moved in a direction. Optus and Vodafone were probably first there, but the whole market is there in terms of the mobile market. There is now greater certainty of pricing and transparency of data pricing. There is lower pricing, and if you look at the fixed line market, increasingly unmetered, effectively unlimited plans are becoming the norm.
Except satellite.
With the exception of satellite, which has its
challenges. We've still got our hashtag data drought.
Now, satellite is going to have its challenges, and I think that's something we all need to think about, because I think not just the industry, government and a range of opinion leaders have probably generated unreal expectations about satellite, and we are going to have to solve it. But these things do exist. But once more, just to show that I do have some affection for Dan, I think he's quite right in terms of what do you do about determining the worth of content. And this is a real challenge, and it's particularly a challenge with usage patterns
Yeah.
on broadband. We're now getting peak hours. Well, and then we're now starting to get calls, do we have traffic management? How do we determine what is the worthy traffic and what is not the worthy traffic?
Yes,
and that's a tough call.
And of course there's issues in relation to privacy there as well, and what your usage actually is. So Ged, yep.
It's kind of I feel like I'm having a bit of a flashback to last year actually when I was sitting on this panel, and I'm not disagreeing with what anyone there has just said, but Jonathan, if I'm hearing some of what you said correctly, a lot of what you're talking about, especially when it comes to access to essential services, and I class things like Headspace as an essential service, for people that often don't have a home broadband service, and you'll notice a lot of people that are on very low incomes, a lot of their main source of access to security or safety or information is a mobile phone. But then it's how do you pay for that service for that mobile phone? How do you ration that service essentially? And it's something that myself and a colleague of mine, Natasha, who's sitting in the audience, have been grappling with since last year and trying to think about what we can do in a way to either what's called unmetering of access to those apps or facilitate access to online and mobile driven services. And we haven't cracked the code yet, but it's something that I would love to be able to catch up with you afterwards about, because it's something that we see as when people, their lifeline really is their mobile phone.
Yep.
The juice for that lifeline is more than they've got in their pocket.
Yep.
You can't hit a brick wall, and we're really thinking how do we try to overcome that brick wall.
Sure.
And you put the fear of God into me with your last comment, so I'm going to have to go and have a last snap back to get over that, I think.
and just one thing, one of the areas where this has had some focus in Telstra is around sort of those crisis times, that with crisis lines and Lifeline and a whole range of those, where we have unmetered those services. So that,
very good point.
And we have some criteria around that, but, where it relates to people in crisis, and they need the phone, that unmetered access.
Now, do you want to say anything more there, Ian?
Different
circumstances, clearly.
Well, I was just going to say that in the fixed line space, all of the relationships are formalised relationships, and there's no ability for us to actually do an informal relationship where someone might be able to have a fixed line service, internet service into their property, but turn it on and off as they actually need it, because we actually have to pay the wholesaler the NBN, and all of those relationships are formalised. So if there was some sort of informal relationship where people could turn it on and off when they actually need it and really require it, that flexibility would address some of these issues, certainly from the fixed line area.
Okay, we'll go to this question in the middle here. It's Claire, isn't it?
Yes, it's Claire from the Isolated Children's Parents Association of New South Wales. Tim, you touched on incentives to further the mobile footprint into remote Australia. In New South Wales, under the Mobile Black Spot program, in round one, there was only one remote area out of 144 successful base stations. There was only one remote area that was successful. So we're hoping that round two will bring about the extra criteria of $10 million being spent in a remote area. Do you think that Telstra and the other telcos, do you think that we're moving in the right direction on this, or do we need to be doing more?
Well, I certainly don't think roaming is going to help, in those circumstances. I think we've got Black Spot 2, we've got Black Spot 3. There may be further things. I gave the example of, of what we're doing in the Northern Territory to remote communities with, in the order of 200, 250 people. So I think, they're clearly that last piece remains a challenge, but roaming is certainly not the answer.
And I've actually, I don't know if you've seen it, Claire, but there's been a report released by the Australian National Auditing Office that looked into the Mobile Black Spots program, and it made some suggestions. Some of them have been taken on board already for the Mobile Black Spots round 2, and hopefully there's a suggestion that the rest of their work will be considered in the third round, which we're not sure when that will start yet, but round 2 is well and truly underway, and hopefully we'll get an announcement soon. Now we have a question, is it from Charlie? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie from New South Wales Farmers. The ANO wasn't very complimentary about the coverage achievement around London Black Spots. And about that, all three of the infrastructure providers have talked about the investment that's going on at the moment. I'd be interested in your comments on how quickly we hit that boundary in terms of mobile coverage. If that's the real issue, how much further can we push it? Everyone's plunging so much money in, and then what does that mean for the future of the black spots net?
Now, do you want that to a particular person or to?
I'd be interested in comments from.
Alright, we might go to Ged Mansour first.
Excellent. Thanks for that. I'll pass it straight on to her.
to what your network offers.
Yeah, no, but it's kind of
a bit of favouritism there.
Well, no, it's a tough one, and it's a tough one for us to have a really strong opinion on. But I think what I've actually seen are two, and not just to show favouritism to the network that we're on, because we know that the network race is hotly contested. We've actually seen the level of complaints related to the network, especially since we moved over to 4G a bit over a year or so ago, plummet. But when we've seen our spread of customers into the rural areas start to increase, but we still know there's a fair way to go there across the board. Okay. But it's something that we know that there is a lot of investment.
You do have something to say about rural and remote.
Yeah. From our point of view, what we're seeing is we've seen the black spot infrastructure actually going into the more populated areas. So, for example, in New South Wales and North Coast, so if you go up in the hills behind Taree, somewhere like Marlee, you'll see that the black spot program is actually put an investment in there. So there might have been 500 premises in that area that were designated Sky Muster satellite because of the hilly terrain, but now there might only be 100 left. So the black spot investment to me seems to have been in the more heavily populated areas, and that's why you're not seeing it reaching right out into the remote areas.
Okay, go to Optus and then...
Yeah, just pick up a little bit of a point on that. One of the things about the Black Spots program, particularly its later iterations, is it's very often driven by community sentiment and community involvement. Unfortunately, one of the indirect effects of that, which people often don't realise, is that perpetuates some of the population versus geography questions about network economics, because naturally the government, and indeed probably the Audit Office would agree, if push came to shove, notwithstanding some of its recent comments, will follow areas where there are numbers of people wanting to communicate in underserved areas. And of course that is a challenge where you've got less people. But what I would say is there are increasingly technological solutions being rolled out. We, for example, roll out satellite-powered microcells now. We trialled it first up and down the Udinadatta track, and the interesting thing about it was when we put it in Udinadatta, we couldn't get it out because the demand was so high. We've just rolled out another 12 in the Northern Territory, and I suspect you'll see more of that sort of thing in the coming rounds of programs. There's also other initiatives that you can do with co-investment. Recently we had our executive out in Orange, and we went out to some of the rural country around Orange, and a group of farmers had got together with one of our local dealers. We just put in 4G, 700, that had extended the coverage, and they worked out a way of putting in a booster antenna, and they literally go out on the back of a four-wheel drive with this thing stuck on a miniature pole. They work out where our tower is, and they can extend the coverage by many, many kilometres, and they're using it for geospatial information for farming practices.
So that's something that we get asked a lot. What are the other solutions? So, not just focusing on getting a tower up, but what are the other solutions? What are the other options? What are the other businesses that people can approach? And this is something that again gets asked consistently.
So just a couple of comments from us. We're huge supporters of the Black Spots program. We won 70 sites in the first round, and we're rolling those out. You're going to see diminishing returns because, again, that model is to subsidise the least efficient form of infrastructure sharing. You still duplicate the radio access network, you duplicate the transmission. So you are going to hit a point where that model is no longer able to deliver increased coverage for less and less population dense areas. and it's there that you need to consider a range of other alternatives. But we think fundamentally that's going to be a single infrastructure, because it has to be the most efficient form of infrastructure and infrastructure sharing. You then have a choice, do you want competition or not? And we think the answer to that has to be yes, otherwise you simply don't get the benefits of...
Circle right round back to the beginning of your point. So Ian, no? Tim, did you want to add anything to your earlier comments about hotspots?
No, not greatly. I think the sort of the technology advancement is a really important area.
Yeah.
And the whole development in that agri-tech space
Yep.
is something that we are particularly focused on. And, we are seeing 3G to 4G to 5G, the Internet of Things. I think we should be net positive around some of the technological solutions that we'll see in the coming years to address some of the challenges of the old world.
Okay, now we're going to take one last question, and it's from Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan. From Australia. I'm just wondering, with the rollout of the NDIS, what is the responsibility of Telcos to direct the interface with consumers to drive service innovation?
Okay, so this is Jonathan. He's from the Physical Disabilities Council, and his question is about the rollout of the NDIS and what role the telcos might be going to play as an interface with service providers, and in a way how you're going to drive innovation in that space. So I might actually start with Telstra, because I know Telstra's had a long history of delivering services for people with disabilities. I'm sure you've thought about this question. That will give the rest of you some time to think about that question.
This is an area of extraordinary sort of innovation, and a couple of sort of examples. And we're really doing a lot of work with organisations like Cerebral Palsy Alliance, independent living centres. What does the connected home of the future look like for someone with a disability? One of the big challenges here, and we don't really have a clear answer, is information. How do we provide information to people with a disability around the technological options, the best apps, and this is a real challenge for the sector because it's not a homogenous group.
Yeah.
I have a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
He has particular needs. There will be children with autism with particular needs. So this is something that I think the whole area of digital communications, digital technology is transforming the lived experience for people with disabilities.
Yeah, absolutely.
The NDIS is an extraordinary investment and social policy reform. We want to be in the forefront here. We're doing that particularly through the connected homes. That's our first foray there. And then trying to be an incubator of innovation with some of the innovative disability organisations.
Yeah, that's great. Does anyone else want to add a comment to innovation and disability in NDIS? Okay, the mic is in Dad's hands.
Yeah, so I completely agree. The potential of communications technology, and particularly the move to machine and Internet of Things, the potential to have a flexible platform that can provide a whole series of, fill a whole series of gaps and needs amongst different segments of the community is huge. And I think we just need to figure out as an industry how we get that moving as fast as possible in Australia.
Okay, and David, probably last comment, because we're actually going to go more into.
Look, I agree with both the former speakers. It's going to be, the role of telcos is going to be absolutely core This is about communication, the Internet of Things, machine to machine, all of that sort of stuff. We're doing it particularly up in Singapore. Singapore's a really interesting case. A developed country like us, but it's come from a long way behind, and it's come, unlike Australia, it hasn't developed a social infrastructure, a health infrastructure. As much as we might criticise our own infrastructure, it hasn't developed that at the same pace that it has developed its overall economic strength. So they're finding that they're getting a great demand for services, they've got an ageing population, and they're having to retrofit things, and retrofitting doesn't work. So what are they turning to? They're turning to the telcos, the IT companies, to do the very sorts of things that we're trying to do with the NDIS here in Australia. So it's going to play a very big role. And it also is a way of delivering those sorts of services while preserving and strengthening people's personal autonomy, which is something that large-scale traditional infrastructure can't do.
Yeah, great final answer. Now, we're going to move to morning tea, but if we can put our hands together to thank these guys for a great panel discussion.